Battle Command uplink initializing. Please stand by.
Tempest Rising is a brand new, high-budget, real-time strategy game created to fill the void left by classic, real-time strategy series like Command & Conquer. It's launching into Steam Advanced Access today with a pre-order, otherwise it'll launch worldwide for everyone 1 week from today on April 24th. This video is sponsored by 3D Realms, and if you haven't guessed already, it's meant to be for those who are either new to Tempest Rising, those returning to RTS after a hiatus, or those who are green to the whole genre entirely. We'll be going over what the game is, what the game isn't, and what you can expect if you decide to give it a crack. So with that being said, if you're already completely and totally up to speed with Tempest Rising, you'll want to keep an eye out for my full review in about a week's time, where I'll be delving into it in depth, covering the campaign mechanics, story, and multiplayer components of the game. But hey, despite that, even the experts out there might have something to learn here, so let's crack right into it. Tempest Rising is set in an alternate history 1990s, where after a devastating world war, a mysterious plant called Tempest is overrunning the Earth, with devastating consequences. However, it's discovered that the liquid Tempest inside the plant itself can be used as an incredibly dense and efficient source of energy. And if Battlefield 2142 has taught us anything, it's that resource scarcity and the allure of vast swaths of energy will inevitably cause a potential world-ending conflict. The two factions that have emerged post-war are the Global Defense Force, or GDF, and the Tempest Dynasty. The GDF are a NATO-like organisation made up of North America and most of Europe, while the Dynasty are a conglomeration of Eastern European and Asian countries who were hit the hardest by the Tempest outbreak, though are subsequently in the best position to utilise its massive potential. Depending on who you ask, the GDF are either the good guys, a global peacekeeping force trying their best to keep the world from delving into even more chaos, or the bad guys, whose militaristic policy and warmongering actions are the root cause of said chaos. The Tempest Dynasty are the same, good or bad depending on your perspective. To some, they're a brutal terrorist organisation, bent on controlling the Tempest resource to fuel their aggressive, brutal expansionism and fight against the GDF. But to others, they're noble freedom fighters, protecting the downtrodden of the world and working in their best interest to create a brighter future, free from GDF oppression, of course. And there is actually a third faction as well, who are coming at a later date. You'll find them in the campaign at some point, and I'll keep the rest a secret for now. There will be a spoiler section in the full review if you're interested, otherwise I promise it's worth discovering for yourself. The Tempest Rising website has a ton of interesting lore and technical details of nearly every aspect of the faction's units, buildings, and characters, and I'd highly recommend you go check it out if you're interested. Personally, I love this stuff and I wish they'd gone even further by including it in the game itself for more eyes to see. Now, if you're at all familiar with the world of Command & Conquer, this entire block may have sounded either slightly or extremely familiar. The GDF and Tempest Dynasty, a volatile, ever-expanding resource, a dark tone and grim outlook on the world. I mean, this is just Tiberian Sun with some CNC3 unit homages thrown in for good measure, right? Well, yes, but also no. Tempest Rising is clearly drawing heavy inspiration from Command & Conquer, to the point where calling it legally distinct CNC isn't that far from the truth. But even still, the GDF vs GDI comparison isn't quite as funny as it sounds, as the Global Defense Force have existed in other games that aren't RTSs for quite a while now. And as well as that, Tempest Rising's gameplay elements do differ in a lot of ways to CNC, and you can tell that Slipgate Ironworks have put in a lot of thought into developing on that formula, of which I will delve into in more depth in the review. Tempest Rising's art style is reminiscent of later Command & Conquer games like Tiberium Wars and Tiberium Twilight, but it also reminds me of other 3D RTSs like Crossfire Legion. Yeah, remember that one? The vibe here is fairly grim. The world is not in a great place, and for most people, life probably isn't very good. But despite that, the graphical quality of everything is very good, and it's absolutely one of the best looking RTS games that I've seen in the past while. The style across both factions is coherent and fantastic to look at all around, with everything from models to effects, animations and textures being some of the best in the business. Except for the fire. I've mentioned this before, but this could take a lesson or two from Command & Conquer 3. Probably the best fire in any RTS game. The soundtrack also does a ton of heavy lifting and pushing the vibe of Tempest Rising. The track list is expansive and it goes insanely hard. Easily some of the best music in any RTS, maybe ever. Definitely in the last few years. Now I'm happy to report that the technical performance of Tempest Rising is very strong. Having system requirements this reasonable is one thing, but actually having a great experience at these requirements is quite another. Thankfully, I can actually speak to this, as recently I downgraded my graphics card from an NVIDIA 40 series to a 10 series, because as it turns out, you don't actually need a lot of horsepower to play RTS games from the 2000s. Funny that, who would have thought it? Granted, the 1080 Ti I use now is much more powerful than the 1060 or RX 580 that the game suggests as a minimum, but I've been running the game at medium-high settings, 4K, with just a light dusting of FSR upscaling, and have been maintaining 60 FPS or more. I even ran the demo a couple of months ago on my Snapdragon X Plus ARM laptop. I mean, not well, but it did run, which is just crazy to think about. It's basically a glorified phone with a big screen and a keyboard. So that's all to say that I'm fairly certain that as long as you have a semi-decent system from the past like 5 or 10 years, which is pretty much how old the 1060 is, by the way, you shouldn't really have any trouble running Tempest Rising. The main selling point here is undoubtedly the campaign, and it's clearly where a huge majority of the game's budget has gone, with its voice acting, in-game cutscenes, and detailed characters. At the time of writing this script, I'm about halfway through both campaigns, so while I don't know the complete trajectory just yet, I've got a pretty good idea of where things are headed. But don't worry, there won't be any spoilers here. But if you're not interested in that side of it, for some insane reason, then the multiplayer suite is no slouch either. There's an option for quick play, as either a solo or a duo, with separate competitive rankings for both factions, as well as the option for casual play. And of course, you can also choose to play skirmish with friends or on your own with the AI, which can be pretty tough, by the way. With a couple of mates from my Discord server, we were struggling against a single hard AI. It managed to take out both of my teammates before I was finally able to punch my way through with what my dead buddy called my punishment squad and snipe their 2 construction yards. So yeah, maybe start with easy. The Dynasty and GDF both play quite differently, and I expect the third unreleased faction to do the same as well. I'd actually say the Dynasty is your more traditional RTS faction and probably the easier of the two to pilot effectively. Their refineries are portable, which makes harvesting Tempest across the map much simpler, and they don't have the separate resource that the GDF needs for parts of its operation to function effectively. And overall, they just have fewer micro-intensive units. Generally, you can rely on the strength and raw firepower of their units to seize the day, like the Boar Heavy Tank, or exceptionally fun to use Tempest Sphere, which literally just runs over units and even has an ability to just propel itself in a certain direction and crush anything in its way. Very cool. As mentioned, the GDF have much more micro-intensive units and rely on things like Intel, which is their separate resource I mentioned earlier, to build a lot of their stronger units and research some abilities. They also have a whole separate thing to worry about in their comms network, which I'll go into in the review, but let's just say the GDF require a bit more microing than their Dynasty counterparts. The factions are further differentiated through their build methods, abilities, and doctrine research, which provides another level of mechanics above the standard build units and throw them at your enemy until there's none of them left. Now when you get back to the campaigns, you'll find a huge variety of scenarios that keep each mission interesting. As mentioned earlier, I haven't finished them just yet, but I'm about halfway through each of them, and as soon as I'm done writing this video, I'll be cracking right back into them. I'm further through the GDF side of things though, so I'll speak to that the most. The first mission functions as a tutorial, as does the first Dynasty mission, and the GDF one is actually the mission that's been featured in previous Tempest Rising demos, like the Next Fest demo back in 2023, so you might have played this one already. You'll then be hopping around Europe completing objectives of varying complexity, doing things like assaulting Dynasty bases, rescuing VIPs, and intercepting convoys. There are some light RPG elements as well to keep things interesting, outside of the missions where you can spend points and funds to unlock new abilities, power up your units, and even grant access to the opposing factions units to use inside of missions, which is pretty darn sweet, especially if you've got one particular one that you'd love to deploy. You can maybe guess what one mine is. It's actually the boar, funny that. Now, while I don't know exactly when the third faction will be released, I'm guessing it's not going to be too far away. Without spoiling too much, you do see a decent chunk of them in the campaign, indicating that they are much more than just some concept art in a game development studio basement. I guess we'll have to wait and see. Hopefully not for too long. So that's Tempest Rising as much as I've experienced it so far. Keep an eye out for my full review coming very soon, about a week's time, where I'll be going in depth with all aspects of the game, from campaign to skirmish, multiplayer, factions, etc, 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 everything and everything. The game is available through Steam Advanced Access starting today, and you can get in with a pre-order of the game's deluxe edition. Otherwise, it's launching in a week, in full for all players. Thanks again to 3D Realms for sponsoring this video, really appreciate it. And for you guys, if you want to see more content like this and that review coming next week, subscribe and hit the bell. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all very soon.